What I would like us to do is to think about those things that we can do something about. It's very easy to talk about the things that are the problems or the issues, and we get long lists of those. But what I want to encourage you to think about, those of you who are in the universities, to think about what you do have control over. And what you have control over is the curriculum, the design and delivery of the curriculum. So that's what I want to talk about today, and that's where I'm going to start. So let's look at what we're actually trying to achieve. Most of you will have long lists of graduate attributes. They could be professional accreditation requirements. You will have learning outcomes coming out your ears in all of your paperwork that you've got. If I'm thinking about a curriculum and I'm thinking about the learning activities that I want to create for students and the assessment tasks that I want to create for them, I want to keep things in my head. I don't want to have to keep going back to a long list of things to say, oh yes, I better tick off that one, better tick off that one, better tick off that one. The 4 things that I have up here, which is from other people's work, I've put this up because I quite like this. These are 4 things that I can keep in my head. I can keep in my head that I'm interested in the way students are thinking. Therefore, the challenge we have in curriculum design and delivery is, do we actually design learning activities and assessment tasks that actually, first of all, develop those skills in our students and then actually assess them? So I encourage you to think about that with your curriculum design and delivery. Do you actually test the way students are thinking? Or do you think you're testing the way they're thinking? So that's the first thing to think about. What about the next thing that's up there, right? The ways of working. Do you actually set up activities for students to do so that they understand how they go about their business, how they go about working? Now, whether that's with other people, whether it's with resources, whether it's with the rest of the community, do you actually set learning activities for students to be able to, first of all, practice that, but then also to be aware of the important things in their ability to engage in that aspect of ways of working? What about the tools for working? Do you actually give students tools that are relevant to their discipline? Do they actually know what's relevant? Do they know how to use them in an appropriate manner? So if you think about your curriculum in terms of its design and delivery, are you incorporating these 3 things that I've said so far? That is, ways of thinking, ways of working, and the tools they use for working. And then the one that we've heard a lot about today, that students need to go, when they graduate, they will go out into the real world. Well, they're already in the real world, but it's the expression we use. They go out once they leave us into the real world, and then they have to actually use all the things that those skills they've been developing, both in their private lives, in their community lives, but also what they do in our institutions. How do they put all that together? And what do we do in our curriculum to actually get students to be aware of that? So I think instead of going through those long lists of things, if every single staff member, when they thought about the learning activities and assessment tasks that they're designing and delivering for their students, thought about these 4 things, that would actually be something you could do on a day-to-day basis. And that's something that we absolutely have some control over. We set up a curriculum that puts our students in a box. So what you need to think about is, how do you get the students out of that box? How do we get them out to do things that are authentic, that are real, that are actually meaningful? So let's not set up artificial curricula, because that's exactly what we do in universities. We set up learning activities and assessment tasks, and in particular assessment tasks. And it was mentioned before, some of the work that I've done earlier is around assessment tasks. A significant number, not all, but a significant number of the tasks that we set up for students are set up solely for the purpose of doing the assessment task. They're not set up for any other meaningful purpose. They have no purpose outside the assessment task. So how about we set some real meaningful things for students that actually have consequences? Because in the real world, everything that you do has a consequence. So let's think about setting up some tasks that actually have some consequences. So what can we do? You need a plan, and that plan can be different for different people. But let's start with a plan, and let's not start with a plan that's yesterday's plan. Let's start with one that's actually moving us forward with those things that I talked about earlier. Let's also come back to these 4 things here and say, in our curriculum, what can we do? Well, the first thing is, I know we say about getting students to work in teams, but you can do that in lots of different ways. I think often students groan, sorry, you can tell me the students as well about this, when they're get asked to work in a team. And that's because normally we set up artificial tasks that can be done perfectly well by the individual, and they actually don't need a team to do. So what's the purpose of giving students teamwork when they can do it by themselves? So let's actually set them tasks that actually need the team, that it actually can't be done just by one person. Again, even if you do nothing else this year, think about how you're going to set up a task that is actually a genuine teamwork task. Let's also build confidence in our students. Students need to be able to have confidence that they can go out and do things. So let's set up activities for them to be able to do that. Part of that is not expecting everyone to get everything right every time. Let's encourage students to be able to make mistakes and actually learn from it. As teachers and educators, let's also show the things that we don't know. Let's also show that we make mistakes and we don't know things as well, because that's how you learn. So let's set up a curriculum that will actually do that. Just one thing that hasn't been mentioned today, and I am going to finish here, is we've been talking about employment and employability. How about getting students to realise they actually have to create their own job? No one's going to give them a job out there. I mean, they'll be lucky if someone else can do that. So one of the things we need to be able to do is set up entrepreneurial activities for students to be able to do to encourage them to think, I'm not going to be dependent on someone giving me a job. I'll go and make one. I'll make my own job out there. So let's make sure we think about that and think about what learning activities and assessment tasks you're going to set for students that will actually encourage that.